Ladies and gentlemen, my dear sisters, I salute all of you. Tomorrow marks the International Women's Day. We extend our warmest greetings to women who have risen for the ideal of equality, made the ultimate sacrifice, and opened the pathway for others, and heralded a new age in our world. I'm delighted that we are holding this conference whose focus is today on the issue of tolerance and equality, and this is being held in Berlin. I offer my thanks to all women's rights advocates in Germany, present here, especially Mrs. Rita Susmuk, who has worked hard to hold this gathering. I deeply appreciate her efforts. Dear friends, in the past 2 centuries, our world has time and again reached new heights in large measures due to women's equality movement. I mean, women's landmark movement for suffrage, their efforts to obtain individual rights and freedoms, including the right to education, to property, to divorce, to inheritance, equal pay, and increase the share of women's participation in the fields of politics and economy. And of course, their selfless struggle in the framework of liberation movement which have fought against dictatorship. But unfortunately, however, the advancement of the ideal of equality has today come face to face with a formidable barrier, the Islamic fundamentalism. While endangering the whole region and world through genocide, terrorism, and discrimination, this phenomenon is most hostile to women. For this reason, today, women's plight throughout the Middle East is entirely entwined with insecurity, oppression, hopelessness, murder, and servitude. Far beyond the Middle East, fundamentalism is now threatening Europe and other regions across the globe. Nevertheless, I want to say that there is a way to defeat and overcome this destructive force. Women's power is the greatest challenger to Islamic fundamentalism. Indeed, the solution is being offered by a resistance movement which believes in the power and leadership of women who are leading this fight against fundamentalism. Dear guests, dear friends, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, at the outset, allow me to explain how fundamentalism came into being. The emergence of fundamentalism stems from a multitude of factors, including social and historical circumstances, as well as policies pursued by the international community. Major developments in the 20th century in their own right impacted the formation and rapid advancement of fundamentalism, but none has been as detrimental as the rise to power of the reactionary mullahs in Iran. This is especially the case because the ruling regime in Iran offered for the first time a model for the fundamentalist group to follow, the very groups who have now become the source of terrorism and war in the Middle East and elsewhere in the world. But is the emergence of fundamentalism, as some says, a face-off between the Islamic world and the West? Or most specifically, is this a confrontation between Islam on the one hand and Christianity and Judaism on the other? No. Indeed, no. In reality, the crux of the conflict is not between Islam and Christianity, not between Islam and the West, and nor between Shia and Sunni. The conflict is over freedom versus subjugation and dictatorship, between equality on one hand and oppression and misogyny on the other. Indeed, why do more than all others fundamentalists direct their vengeance and violence towards women? Why? First, because their backward nature has rendered them misogynist. And second, during the 1979 revolution in Iran, as well as in social movement in other Middle East countries, the fundamentalists were challenged and are being challenged today with an immense yearning for freedom and equality, which pivots around women's emancipation. For this reason, misogyny lies at the core fundamentalist mindset, which by suppression of women oppresses and intimidates the society as a whole. But I must say that I must emphasize that fundamentalism is a defensive reaction to the freedom and equality movement, and can certainly, with no doubt, it cannot withstand the determination of the Middle East nations to move forward and attain freedom and equality. They cannot resist that. Freedom will prevail over fundamentalism. Certainly, freedom will prevail over fundamentalism and reactionary forces. Dear friends, confronting fundamentalism requires a comprehensive solution, including a cultural response to this phenomena. By invoking the name of Islam, fundamentalism uses this religion as a weapon to go on offensive. Thus, the answer is in democratic Islam, the antithesis to fundamentalism. I must therefore emphasize that these two phenomena are diametrically oppose one another. One is dictatorial ideology, and the other is the religion of freedom, which recognizes sovereignty as the most important rights of the people. One defends religious discrimination, the other is an Islam which defends equal rights for the followers of other religions. One is monopolistic and dogmatic, the other is a tolerant Islam which promotes respect for the belief in other ideas and religions. One is a religion imposed through force, the other one is an Islam which rejects any compulsion in religion. One practices misogyny, the other one promotes gender equality. By understanding this reality half a century ago, the People's Mujahideen Organization of Iran, MEK, challenged Islamic fundamentalism. Speaking about this to Islam, the resistance leader Maryam Rajavi said once that one interpretation of Islam, and I quote, is the harbinger of darkness, while the other is the standard barrier of freedom, unity, and emancipation. But the battle between these two, which is at the same time a battle of destiny for Iranian people and history, is one of the most important tests of contemporary humanity. Dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, now we must answer this question. Politically speaking, what is the solution to fundamentalism? Today, in Asia and Africa, different fundamentalist groups are engaged in destruction and terrorism under the banner of Islam. Their atrocities, having spread to Paris, Brussels, and Copenhagen, have endangered human society. How can this danger be thwarted? Where is the core of this danger, which, if destroyed, would mean end of Islamic fundamentalism? We must find the answer in challenging the religious dictatorship ruling Iran, because this regime is and its support for Bashar Assad dictatorship in Syria and Maliki in Iraq led to the emergence of fundamentalist militia and paramilitary groups such as ISIS. As such, silence vis-à-vis the Iranian regime meddling in Syria, Iraq, and other regional countries, let alone collaborating with it under the pretext of confronting ISIS, represent a strategic mistake. It would be delusional to ask the arsonists to put out their arson. To the contrary, the correct policy is to evict the mullah's regime from Iraq and Syria. The Iranian regime is the founding state for most of the atrocities and evil which fundamentalist groups have perpetrated and are perpetrating by using the mullah's rule as a model, as a role model. Indeed, who made stoning to death an official practice in the last 2 decades of the 20th century? Who enacted in law eye gouging and limb amputation as punishment? Who massacred the largest number of political prisoners since the Second World War? And in the contemporary history, who was the first to issue fatwa to murder a foreign author? Who revived and used a reactionary caliphate as a role model? Yes, indeed, it is the Velayat Faqih regime in Iran, which is the godfather of terrorism, the enemy of the Middle East nations, and the primary threat to global peace and security. As we mark the International Women's Day, I must say that Khomeini and his cronies have perpetrated many heinous crimes and assaults against women, most of which have remained untold even now. The reality is that the shocking and heart-wrenching crimes committed by ISIS in recent months, which has shocked the world, is only a small part of the catastrophe the Iranian people have had to endure over the past 36 years. It was the mullah's regime which initiated terrorism under the banner of Islam in the region. Fortunately, leaders of Western powers have unequivocally distinguished between Islam and fundamentalism. As Chancellor Merkel recently said that terror under the banner of Islam was an insult to God. But this is not enough. Indeed, we must, the Iranian regime, which is the founder of this phenomenon, must be targeted, because this is the regime that has been spreading this phenomenon. For this reason, bringing down this regime, which acts as a godfather of ISIS, is an urgent imperative, not only for the Iranian people, but for the Middle East and the world at large. Dear friends, the international community cannot defeat fundamentalism unless and until it targets the epicenter of fundamentalism, namely the mullahs regime in Iran. Western policy of appeasement is at fault because the West has not only failed to seriously confront fundamentalism, but has chosen the path of conciliation with its state sponsor of terrorism, the regime in Iran, and partnered with it in clamping down on alternative of fundamentalism. Indeed, why are Western governments are confused over how to deal with ISIS and extremism under the name of Islam? Why have they failed to correctly identify the reality of fundamentalism, its threats and its profound weaknesses? I tell you, because they are immersed in appeasing the fundamentalists. We tell them to stop appeasement and separate your ranks from the epicenter of fundamentalism, namely the regime in Iran. Similarly, I want to warn that offering concessions to this regime during the nuclear talks run counter to the highest interests of the people of Iran and the region and undermines global peace and security. It is also tantamount to sacrificing human rights of Iranian people. Just a few days ago, simultaneous with nuclear talks, the mullahs hanged dozens of prisoners, both secretly and publicly, including 6 Sunni Kurdish political prisoners who had been on a hunger strike. Their execution was a bid to control or to conceal the regime's impasse and prevent popular uprising. We hail those martyrs. And I stress that silence and inaction over these inhuman crimes under the pretext of nuclear negotiation only embolden the mullahs to continue such atrocities and persist in their bomb-making project. The mullahs came to the negotiation table out of utter desperation, but the policy of appeasement has emboldened the mullahs. Such a feeble policy amounts to encouraging fundamentalism, so Western powers must end it. Dear friends, as I said, there is a solution because the Iranian people have at no time remained silent vis-à-vis the ruling religious dictatorship. And it is more than 3 decades that they have worked to form a democratic alternative against it. This alternative, as its core, is a movement that believes in a genuine and democratic Islam and emphasize the separation of religion and state. It is a powerful alternative and the harbinger of women equality in all aspects, especially in political leadership and governance. This movement owes its perseverance and advancement to its belief in the ideal of equality. The presence of women at all levels of this movement and their steadfastness at the forefront of the battle amid the most intense pressure and killings has created a new level of commitment to the ideal of equality and by extension endowed this movement with a new level of strength and perseverance. Indeed, a movement which finds fulfillment in its own ideal and is not deterred by the balances of power, endures, advances, remains invigorated and refreshed, and creates new values which provides it with the power to preserve today and to rebuild tomorrow. These values include giving primacy to love, affection, friendship, and putting one's fellow colleagues first. Such values are the mirror image of rivalry, envy, and eliminating others. It is, in one word, love in place of hatred. They include not losing hope and not succumbing to hardship despite the difficulties and the length of this struggle. I must say that these values do not belong to Iran's pioneer women and men. They are key to progress and liberation wherever there is oppression and equality. This is a path and a mantra which urges hope and continuing struggle. It promotes steadfastness and perseverance. I salute all of you. And now, my dear sisters, liberated women in Syria, Iraq, Palestine, Tunisia, Egypt, Jordan, Yemen, Libya, Morocco, Afghanistan, India, Pakistan, Europe, and America, and elsewhere around the world. I call on all of you to form and expand a powerful front against Islamic fundamentalism, terrorism, and barbarism under the name of Islam. When the murder of our children in Pakistan is tolerated, when the abduction of our daughters in Nigeria and the murder and widespread homelessness of women and children in Syria become routine, when there is no one expressing outrage at the execution of Rehana Jabbar in Iran and splashing acid on their face, on our sisters, it is the force and power of women which can and must rise to the occasion. It is the voice of women, the cries and protests of the women and their unity that can and must stop this catastrophe from continuing. because of this historic responsibility, changing the status quo is the duty of all of us, and we must all work together to realize it. Whether it is women's rights to equality in all spheres, or the right to choose one's clothing, or abolishing compulsory veiling, or equal participation in political leadership. Indeed, we must create a world based on justice, freedom, and equality. The creation of such a world, women, by women, is certainly possible. From here, with Maryam, we can and we must. From here to all my sisters across Iran, I salute them. To valiant women who persevere in prisons at this very moment, to young women whose voices are the loudest outcries in Iran today, to women teachers who took part in teachers' protest movement in large number in these past few days, and to my sisters who are workers, employees, and nurses who study at University or High School, I say today to all of you that you carry the mantle of liberation of Iran. You have the several generations of martyred women as role model, from Fatima Amini, Ashraf Rajavi, Azam Ruhi Ahangaran, Marzieh Oskoi, and the bright stars of Camp Ashraf, Zohre Qaimi, Giti Gibetyan, Sabah Faradaran, Mehdi Faride, Razieh Kermanshah, and 1,000. You have them all before you, and now the continued struggle of 1,000 vanguard women in the rank of the MEK, in particular at Camp Liberty, shows the correctness of your path in the fight against Islamic fundamentalism. And let us hear, all of us, to join voices and tell the international community, to the United States government and the European Union and United Nations, that largest movement comprised of pioneer women in Camp Liberty is the source of hope and inspiration for Iranian women, and is a treasure for equality movement everywhere. You must not ignore their protection. And let me say it loud and clear that if you are not going to guarantee the protection of the Mujahideen in Camp Liberty, you must at least return part of their personal weapons so that they can defend themselves in the face of assault by the terrorist Quds Force and the Iranian regime's militia. Otherwise, you are feeding the beast of fundamentalism. And let me say aloud that if So I say to you, freedom-seeking women and men throughout the world, to strengthen this anti-fundamentalist front in order to protect the rights of the MEK people in liberty. Indeed, there is a moment in history when the history is looming, the world will be rid of the nightmare of fundamentalism, and the nations of the Middle East will be saved from this evil spell. This will come around with our unity and our solidity. Yes, we can and we must. We can and we must do it. I salute all of you.